The Shadow, in room 309. In a quiet town located in the heart of Vermont, there was an old inn called the Blue Raven Inn. The inn had been decaying over time, but despite its deterioration, it still held a mysterious charm that attracted curious visitors from all directions. Its facade was ruined, its windows covered in dust, and inside, the furniture was old and worn from frequent use. However, there was a secret surrounding room 309. Local residents had spread many rumors about this room. The stories spoke of guests who entered it, but did not leave as they had entered. Some came back unable to speak a word, others left in a state of sheer panic, and some left behind inexplicable belongings. Among the tales were reports of strange sounds echoing in the empty hallways, or seeing shadows moving without reason. Jonathan Miller, a well-known travel journalist, entered the Blue Raven Inn after reading many stories about room 309 while researching haunted places around the world. He was always skeptical of such tales, but was strangely fascinated by this inn. He wanted to write an article about places that claimed to be haunted. One night in a haunted room. That would make the perfect headline for my article, Jonathan said with a laugh as he approached the reception desk. The elderly receptionist, whose eyes seemed to have witnessed many things throughout her life, hesitated slightly when he asked to stay in room 309. "Are you sure, sir?" she said in a low voice, her eyes gleaming with caution. Many have left suddenly, and no one knows why. Jonathan smiled confidently and said, "Don't worry, I'm just looking for an interesting story." She handed him the key and murmured with a shaky voice, "If you hear whispers, don't respond." He didn't take her words seriously and considered them just part of the hotel's legends. The room was perfectly ordinary in appearance. There was a large oak bed, walls decorated with faded roses, and a single chair by the window overlooking a dark garden. But the atmosphere in the room was unusual. The air was thick, as if something hidden was watching his every move. Nevertheless, Jonathan decided to start documenting his experience. He took out his audio recorder, notebook, and thermal camera, and sat in the chair by the window. Everything was eerily quiet, with a long time passing without anything happening. As time passed, darkness settled in. It neared midnight, but the room still showed no signs of anything unusual. There was no supernatural activity up until that point. Then, unexpectedly, he heard a soft whisper near his ear. "Jonathan." His heart stopped. The whisper was so faint, like a thread of warm air. He looked around but saw no one. His devices were functioning normally, with no interference. The whisper came again, but this time from the direction of the closet in the far corner. "Come closer." At that moment, his heart raced faster, and his mind questioned. Was it just imagination? Was this what fear had done to him? Nonetheless, he approached the closet. He opened the door wide and discovered it was completely empty, except for the dusty hangers hanging from the bars. He sighed in relief and felt embarrassed by his fear. But as soon as he closed the door and turned his back, he suddenly heard a loud slam of the door behind him. The room instantly became cold. The air grew heavy, pressing on his chest. He began to hear whispers echoing around him, muffled whispers as if they were coming from every corner of the room. "You shouldn't have come here." Jonathan jumped, gripping his recorder. "Who are you? What do you want?" he asked, his voice trembling as he searched the room. Then, the sound abruptly stopped, and the atmosphere became eerily still. But in the far corner of the room, something strange began to take shape. The shadows grew slowly, taking the form of a tall man, his features unclear, and his eyes empty as though they were nothing more than black voids. The shadow spoke in a deep voice, as if coming from the depths of hell. "You are like the others. Your curiosity will lead you to ruin." Despite the fear coursing through him, Jonathan tried to remain calm. "Who are you?" he asked. But deep down, he knew that he might not escape this strange entity. "I am the guardian of this place," the shadow said in a sharp voice. "Bound here by those who deceived and killed me. Now, I will strike you down, just as I did with the others." Suddenly he felt his body freeze, as if the air had grown too thick, nearly suffocating him. Strange images flooded his mind. Images of a man who had been deceived, murdered, and buried in this inn many years ago. He was no mere ghost. He was a being bound by vengeance. In that moment, Jonathan recalled the warning from the receptionist. "If you hear whispers, don't respond." But he had done just that. In that moment, he felt cold tears trickling down his face. He gathered his strength and took out a small silver cross he had received from his grandmother. He raised it high, and the shadow seemed to recoil slightly. "Leave me!" Jonathan shouted with all his remaining strength. But the shadow didn't retreat completely. It began to tremble, as if it were in an internal struggle. Jonathan seized the moment and ran toward the door, shouting desperately, while the whispers grew louder, as if they filled the space around him. He finally managed to escape, bursting into the dark hallway. The receptionist was waiting for him downstairs, her face soaked in sorrow. "You saw her, didn't you?" she said in a quiet voice, as though she had been expecting this to happen. Jonathan nodded, unable to say a word. She handed him an old notebook filled with notes and visions from the past. "You're not the first, but you're the only one who survived. That's more than many can say." He didn't look back as he left the inn that night, determined never to return. However, when he went back to his daily life and wrote his article, he chose to leave one thing in the dark. The last whisper the creature said as he fled: "You can leave this place, but I will follow you."